As I've made a video analyzing the general Heartless motifs and how KH1 and KH2's Heartless differ, as well as making a video where I attempt to redraw various Kingdom Hearts 2 Heartless to fit Kingdom Hearts 1's design philosophy, it was only natural that I take a look at how badly the Heartless were massacred in Kingdom Hearts 1's Final Mix re-release. I'll go over each Heartless which got its colors pulverized and quickly discuss whether I think they suffered a fate worse than death or if their new colors are actually an improvement. Okay, I'm going into this a bit too negatively. There are actually some recolors I do like, and once we've gone over all of them, we'll crown a winner. I have my suspicions of which game's Pallette will win, but we'll see. For unknown reasons, only some of the Heartless were changed, while several were kept the same. All the purebloods are untouched. What would they have done to them anyways? Make them white? No! The magic mages, or the prismatic melodies as they are often called, are also kept the same. Again, what could they have done here? Their colors are so intrinsic to their abilities that you could at most only tweak their saturations or hues slightly. The red Nocturne could have had a brighter or darker red, I guess. I'm happy they remain the same, of course. The Mushroom Heartless are still the same, and so is this bunch. I am so happy they didn't do anything to especially Kurt Sisa. Could you imagine what these guys would have looked like had they gotten the recolor treatment? Something like this, I reckon. Oof. I believe I saw a comment somewhere once, which I think described it perfectly. I'll paraphrase, but they essentially said, "The original Heartless palettes were carefully chosen to account for their environments, while the colors for the Final Mix Heartless, however, were chosen to just be different." And I couldn't agree more with that. The original ones were designed with consideration of its surroundings and pairings, and the recolors were seemingly not. Sometimes it worked, often it didn't, but we'll see soon. My general annoyance with many of the recolors is how they often remove the Heartless original blues and purples, which are vital to their core concept and theme. Their general dark aesthetics are then replaced with loud, in-your-face colors. Here's an image of all the Heartless featured in base Kingdom Hearts 1. You have some that are orange, yellow, green, or just brightly colored, and that's fine. As is, it's varied decently while still having variations of purple, violet, magenta, and dark blues still dominate most of the designs. Moving over to the Final Mix palette, you'll see now that it's much more dominated by yellows, orange, and as I said, it's much louder. And here also is the same palette but adding in the new Heartlesses as well. Most of those new ones I think look fine. Many of the orange Heartless look fine, if I'm being completely honest, but I just don't like them being the primary color. It is also so wild that they didn't include an option to toggle between the original design and the recolored one when they released the HD collections. Not even when they re-released it for the PS4. My ideal version is that you could toggle each one individually, as I do think a few of the recolored ones are superior. Or you could customize it to have all the worst variations, if you'd want to do a I Hate My Eyes playthrough. So far, they haven't added such a feature, but I still hold out for us getting it someday. I know there are mods for it, but it'd be nice to have on console as well. Anyways, let's begin. Our first brave little soldier who got sucked up by the Final Mix vortex and spat out again is none other than, well, the soldier. I'm quite fond of the soldier. I've mentioned earlier that I tend to view Emblem Heartless as just purebloods with clothes, or rather I view purebloods as naked Emblem Heartless. So as I first saw this as a child, all I could see was an upstanding citizen turning into an upstanding shadow, dressed in fancy garments. Having been introduced to the shadows and the dark side first, it comes as a fun surprise to see that Heartless also wear clothes and armor. It fits its environment so well, and thus has you excited for what other world-themed Heartless will eventually encounter. As for the topic at hand, I don't dislike the Final Mix version, but the original is just so vastly more iconic and full of life. The Final Mix one feels like someone played around with the saturation and called it a day. The original just fits the nightly atmosphere of Traverse Town a lot more, and generally comes off as far more menacing as well. And though I'm sure court jesters came in an array of differently colored outfits, I just feel the blues and the purples work slightly better than the yellow and brown palette when considering that specific reference. The Final Mix version is fine, but I'm not gonna settle for fine, I'm gonna demand the best, and the original is just vastly superior. The soldier and the large body are connected through both their theming and palette, so I guess it's nice to see their connection survive through to the Final Mix, even if the colors are duller. Its more monochromatic palette could have been a fine enough Colosseum exclusive variant, but it's just disappointing seeing it appear in any other world. Just as with the soldier, the original just does a better job bringing to life the medieval elements than I think the Final Mix version does. At least it's not as monochrome as the soldier, as the large body has blue cuffs to contrast the rest of the fit. but once again the point goes to the original. For years I've called the Guard Armor Final Mix version for the McDonald's Heartless. It's quite evocative of McDonald's branding from 20 years ago, when it was still flourishing with vibrant colors, but unfortunately, current day McDonald's has also suffered from a dull Final Mix overall. The original design is so menacing and it feels so rightly at home in Traverse Town, despite it being an invader. When Leon tells you to ignore the small fry and prioritize finding the boss, when you then finally meet the Guard Armor, you really get the sense that this is the soldier's overlord, both from its design and its palette. This, however, is no longer the case in the Final Mix, as their colors are no longer in the same realm. Purple is also historically often associated with royalty, as it was quite an expensive color to produce, thus also emphasizing the superiority it has over the soldiers. Purple is also the color for darkness in Kingdom Hearts, so once again, replacing the original colors for this clown makeup is a straight up shame. I will say this though, that the Ronald McDonald armor does at least fit in with the 3rd district's more modern look and vibrant colors, so it's not completely out of place within its environment. But for its rematch as a 2nd district, it's a darn embarrassment. The original is definitely the better fit for that area, and just the best version overall, regardless of how you look at it. So were you to say, look at it upside down, the point would still go to the original one. And before we move on, I just gotta ask, why do so many people clown on the opposite armor, including Square Enix with these fuck-ass colors? I'm sure there are other fans out there, but more often than not, I hear people calling it lame. 8-year-old Joseph, who also used to be a big Transformers guy, found the Guard Armor's transformation to be so darn cool. Flipping its torso, swapping its limbs, and when that faceplate dropped down and it menacingly stared at you, you knew you were in for a solid beating. Which you could of course just believe. But anyways, this shit's lit, yo! Screw the haters, the opposite armor is goated. Compared to the soldier's recoloring, I actually think the air soldier's new colors are almost acceptable. But similar to the soldier, it just feels like someone slapped a filter on top of the original textures and went home for the weekend. What really grinds my gears though is that the soldier, large body and air soldier are no longer connected through their palette as they originally were, as this one goes in a whole new direction from the other two. Makes you wonder why they even bother to have the latter two still share a palette. Go all the way and make the large body red or turquoise. Barring that, these new colors aren't that bad. I do enjoy its purple wings, and in a way it's almost closer to the original soldier now than it was before. But I'm not too big on the new color on the hat and the shoes, so once again, the original walks away with the point, or flies away. The Trickmaster's new colors is a good match for the Bizarre Room, but they also kind of just drowns in it. The Heartless just becomes too soft. But the original design also fit the room well, but manages to stand out and not just vanish. It's also just a much more striking design, with its colors referencing a deck of cards. But I have to ask, who at Square had the nerve, the audacity, to take the Final Mix version, multiply it, and present it as a brand new Heartless called Crimson Pranksters? They're not even crimson! I was a bit tempted to go for a tie, but I realized it's mainly just due to the Final Mixes still not having gotten any points yet. And I can't be giving out pity points. I just can't. There was more of an attempt here than what we've seen so far in my opinion, but once again the superior palette walks away with a point, and that's the original. The Power Wild is one of my favorite Heartlesses. They're so frantic, and more so than many of the others. I actually quite like this recolor. It's so energetic and vibrant, and I can in many cases be quite the sucker for vibrant colors. The original is more muted with a tint of purple on its legs, arms and tail. But it's not like every Heartless need to have a moody purple design, and besides I think the new colors match his personality a lot better. So while I'm for once leaning towards the Final Mix version, I gotta admit that I don't like having the orange Power Wild paired with an orange Bouncy Wild, cause spoilers, I prefer the original Bouncy Wild. So what do I do then? Do I consider them individually, or do I consider them as a pair? It's hard to consider their designs in pure isolation, because you have to consider their environment, and the other foes they're paired with. I'll add a few more thoughts on this once we're done with the Bouncy Wild, but I think I'm actually gonna go ahead and give the point, for the first time thus far, to the Final Mix. As I just said, I prefer the original one. I'm just more drawn to the orange, and I'm also not so fond of one of the few feminine Heartless being pushed towards being pink. I also find the orange to be a more fun color for the monkeys, and they pop well within the jungle environment. My ideal version of Deep Jungle is definitely not to have both of them be orange, so if I had to choose a pair, I think I'd go for the Final Mix couple over the original. I guess I'm a bit higher up on the pink bouncy wild than I am on the grey power wild. But I do think all of the palettes across both versions are quite solid. Again, I wouldn't want to have both of them be orange, but I also just prefer both orange palettes over the other, so point goes to the original. The Stealth Sneak barely feels like a Heartless. Aside from the emblem, what about this evoke anything Heartless? It's not got any swirly antennas or symbols, I guess a swirly tail. It has no zigzag patterns, and its eyes are unlike any other Heartless, aside from still being yellowish. And none of that is changed for the Final Mix version, but it does have one thing over the original, which induces a bit more of a Heartless feel, and that's its badass tattoos. The original is just a chameleon and nothing more, but with the added tattoos, it becomes far more otherworldly, making it more of a monster and less a regular animal. So yeah, for the Stealth Sneak, I'll go with the Final Mix version any day, every day. It's just so cool.
He's so cool.
The original bandits are your average grunt enemy. They're at the bottom of Agrabah's adversary hierarchy. Okay, maybe not below the pot spiders. The Recolor, however, elevate their status immensely. These feel like they should be called High Bandit or something. These should be commanding the other lowly bandits. And as I view them as being of a higher rank, it feels weird to see an abundance of them running around, like seeing a horde of generals running at you with no lieutenants in sight. And thus I feel the original design functions better in that regard. They feel more like average bandits, while the Final Mix feel too glamorous. And the original also fit the general moody Heartless vibe better, but that's the case for most of the OG designs. The Recolor do still retain some blues and purples, so it's not completely devoid of that vibe. So, in the end, I do think I prefer the new colors. So point to that one. The original Fat Bandits has such great colors. The palette is very fitting of its environment, as well as it being a fire-oriented Heartless. The Final Mix design has a much darker red vest that is still fitting for its element. I can't decide if the more varied colors give it higher status, or if it just comes off as clumsy, as if it couldn't properly match its outfit and just threw on whatever was lying nearby. I don't feel the colors harmonize quite well, and it's a bit more frustrating to look at. But its more varied palette definitely gives it a more magical vibe, and thus I at least think it works quite well within the Cave of Wonders. You could have called this variation a mystical bandit, or fat magician, but I'd still pick the original design any day of the week, except Wednesdays. Wednesdays are kinda crazy. The Search Ghost is first encountered in Monstro's chambers, coming off as the ghosts of lost souls who met their end in the bowels of the Great Whale. They're quite uneasy to look at, and will fittingly fade in and out of view, and they naturally function really well within Halloween Town too. The Final Mix version? I don't hate it. I actually think it works quite well within Monstro. It doesn't evoke the feeling of a lost soul anymore, but come off as a type of bacteria instead. Which is a good fit considering we're venturing through the insides of a living creature. Monstro has zero filter on what he devours, so of course there's bound to be bacteria and viruses within. But I don't think the new Search Ghost works within Halloween Town. The orange head is kinda similar to a pumpkin, but it just doesn't quite work, and just feel like an overcomplication. Had it not had yellow eyes and just been hollow, it could have made that reference a bit clearer, and thus worked slightly better. But it still just feels like too much. When looking at the original Search Ghost, I've never thought to myself,
damn, he should have a pumpkin head too.
In Atlantica as well, the original feel like the ghosts of dead sailors, while the Final Mix is just, I don't know, vomit? The original is simpler and much stronger for it, and works the best in all of the worlds it appears in. The original Parasite Cage just has a much more carefully chosen palette, as per usual. As for the Final Mix, similar to the Search Ghost, it feels a bit sicklier and makes me think of bacteria, or a parasite as it's aptly named. But I also think the core design itself, disregarding any palette, is strong enough as it is. It looks very organic and squishy, with its unsettling tentacles, while also being quite off-putting with its little pedal skirt. So I don't think you need to double down on the parasite bit by having the colors be so sickly too. The eyes also don't pop anymore, like at all. I'm too accustomed to what I know and what I first saw, but I also think it's much stronger, so the point goes once again to the original. Honestly, either version is really quite fine. A lot of jellyfishes are quite translucent, but there's also ones that vary between yellow and red. These orange bastards I've spent much of my childhood trying to avoid, as they'll burn you if you touch them. So having the Heartless resemble the real-life more threatening counterpart isn't a bad change. I said I would consider a Heartless in isolation, but I do think a yellow sea neon paired with a green screwdriver and a blue aqua tank would make a stronger looking trio. Part of me wants to default to the OG one, but I also really think the yellow and orange version goes well with the generally blue Atlantica. A rare victory to the final mix. I guess it could have been cool if we had the grey one split into the more aggressive and smaller yellow ones, but I guess it wouldn't make much sense as it's separating itself, so why would it change color? Though when Ventus got split in half of him looked exactly the same as it did before, while the other half looked like this. So maybe grey jellyfish to yellowfish isn't so crazy after all. Anywho, same victory as the previous one, obviously. Now, you see, I don't like this at all. The final mix version is just hideous to look at. Now, I'd almost say the original kind of vanishes into the background with its palette, but as I double checked what Atlantica looks like, I see it's more turquoise, a dark aqua, or a dull and muted blue, compared to the aqua tank, which is brighter. And besides, sometimes it's nice to have the monster contrast its surroundings, while other times it's preferable to have it match it. I don't have a clear answer for when one's more desirable over the other. I guess it's mainly down to vibes and preferences. Sometimes it can enhance the feeling of said monster belonging within its environment, while other times you want to draw focus to how it's an outsider trespassing. I don't know. What I do know is which gets the point, and that's the original, as I find the final mix one to just be dull, boring, and ugly. White Knight or Yellow Knight? That is the question. And it's quite the easy question because it's obviously the one its name is a pun on. Why they make it yellow? It looks like it's been using too much tanning or gone for a swim in an ocean of cheese doodles. It looks like it's constantly affected by some status ailment. I don't want this. I don't think anyone wants this. Raise your hand if you prefer this, please. I want to know if Square actually managed to please anyone with this change. Don't worry, I won't bite, I'm just very curious. And I'm very happy for you if you actually like this. The crimson hands are a bit cool, I suppose. That's the only compliment I can give. Next. Why? This is vomit. Visual vomit. The original was so good, whereas the recolored one, it doesn't even look like there was an attempt there. Had it been primarily blue, it still would have been inferior, but it would have been fine. But what's with the acid green arms and the screaming orange? What happened here? The original works so well for Halloween Town with its dark and relatively monochromatic palette. This one's just sad, and not the good sad even. Actually, I think Halloween Town suffers the most in Final Mix. Neither the Surge Ghost, White Knight, and this one feel at home here anymore.
I'm shocked they didn't make the black fungus a loud green or orange.
That's probably why the Chimero showed up. It saw how lame the others had become and decided someone should do the town justice. Air Pirate, or beefy hunk in the sky. Their arms are very similar to the large bodies, starting out with a smaller upper part which grows into massive forearms with bracelets around them. The Final Mix version is cool. Similar to the Bandit, it feels like an elite version. You could call it Air Raider or Falcon Pirate or something. I actually think I like them both equally, but I do prefer having the original one paired with the red regular pirates a lot more. I just need that contrast, you know. For any other world it doesn't matter, but it matters in Neverland, where I would say it matters the most. Easy. Super easy.
I vastly prefer the Final Mix one.
The original one just looks fake. The ship feels like a toy. To me it looks like the ship is built with untreated wood or not been stained yet. I also find that the Final Mix version just match Hook's ships a lot more. They're not the same color. Hook's ship is a sort of deep crimson, and the Final Mix battleship is more like a raspberry or a dark magenta. But they are similar enough. I do prefer the captain to have a blue head over a green, as well as having a dark sail over a light one, but I don't prefer it enough for it to make a difference. So, point goes to the Final Mix. I love the Phantom. We love the Phantom. Such a creepy and straight up scary Heartless. The way it creeps up on you as you fly through the night, not to mention its ability to permanently kill your party members, further cementing it as a shadowy and dangerous foe. I think both of these designs are equally strong for what they intend to be. The original is dark and simple, very fitting for its ominous and terrifying presence, while the other feels much more aggressive and paranormal with its high contrasting colors and its texture reminiscent of black smoke. I could see people thinking the final mix feels like it's overstating its design and that it lacks the original subtleties and simplicity. But personally, I find that it looks even more terrifying and ghostly than the original one. Damn, this is hard. The original beautifully matches the castle and the skybox so well, while the Recolor version contrasts it nicely. The original one has this contrast between its body and wings, almost as if they've been sewed on, while the final mix has the body seamlessly transition from body to wing. I like both. The final mix version has this black texture on its back, which goes down and spread out on its thighs. Not needed, but a bit neat nonetheless. Cheat. I'm not sure. The blue one has red lines on its claws. That's very cool, as if they're bloodstains from past victims. No, but I do think... Yeah, I slightly prefer the original one. Yes I do. Okay, we got that one settled. While I do like both, I just find the OG to be more iconic. We first encounter the Behemoth within the dark depths at Hollow Bastion, so I just find it fitting that the Heartless which shows up is this purple literal Behemoth, looking as if it's been infused with darkness. It also much more closely resembles the Behemoth from Final Fantasy. But I do like the new one fine enough. I actually think it would have fit in well with the game's original Heartless palette too. And I especially like the Crimson Horn and Claws, though I don't think they would have worked on a purple variant. The Behemoth is an interesting case in the final mix, cause there's two new ones introduced as well.
And unlike the Black Ballad, the Grand Ghost, the Chimera, etc.,
that are additional Heartlesses, which doesn't replace any pre-existing ones, the pair of new Behemoths on the other hand does actually replace the original one in most cases. As I assume most of you are aware, the final mix version displayed here only ever appears in Hollow Bastion, while the multiple Behemoths which appears in End of the World have now been replaced by the Arch Behemoth, and the Behemoth featured in the Hades Cup is now a destroyed Behemoth instead. And to this I say, thank goodness. As large and menacing as it is upon its first encounter, it ain't particularly fun to fight, so having to refight it multiple times quickly becomes a bit of a chore. The new ones fight identical to the original one, so that problem still isn't solved, but at least they look visually different, which helps a lot for me at least. So what do I do then? Do I give additional points to the final mix for shaking things up? Okay, original Behemoth beats final mix Behemoth. Original Behemoth barely beat the destroyed Behemoth. I really appreciate the variation, and I do think it's cool looking, but I also feel it's trying a bit too hard to look cool. That said, Kid Joseph definitely thought this was the coolest of the Behemoths. And then there's the last duel, where the Arch Behemoth beats the original one. It has the same patterns as the destroyed one, but it feels a bit more subtle. It isn't as in your face, and the contrast between the colors aren't as intense. And out of the 4 variations, I find this one to be the most appropriate for the End of the World, while I do find the destroyed Behemoth to be the most appropriate for the Colosseum. Oh. Well, okay, fine. Saying that makes me realize I should change my previous vote. So the destroyed Behemoth beats the original one after all. And with this, we've reached our last Recolor Heartless. The Angel Star is such a spectacular Heartless, a biblical accurate angel merged with a light bulb of all things. Let there be light, as our Lord and Savior Sora once said.
Kingdom Hearts is light!
The original palette is just perfect in my opinion. It's so radiant and holy. I suppose it's odd to have such a light and heavenly themed Heartless, but it's also exactly that contrast which allures me. And as far as I can remember, there's no other Heartless quite like it either. Not even a Union Cross variant, which is rare seeing as that game has a million variations of most Heartless designs. I just find it so cool to battle against both angels and demons while descending the apocalyptic end of the world. I do think the final mix version is fine though. It's much ghastlier and colder, and with its violet pads on the wings, it overall fits the general OG Heartless palette a bit more. I do wish the bottom had been completely white, or maybe that white and yellow was swapped, just to make it feel even colder. But again, I just find the original to be as perfect as it could have been, and contrast its buddy the Invisible a lot better. And as we all probably could have predicted, the winner is the OG palette with a score of 17-9, though Final Mix managed to harness a few more points than I would have originally assumed. Now I also want to briefly go over some of the new Heartless introduced, specifically the ones that are just recolors. I don't have any beef with any of those, as their existence doesn't take away the existence of others. I was not at all a fan of the Gargoyle's new palette, but had it existed as a separate Heartless, not replacing the OG purple Gargoyle, I would have had less problem with it. It still would have looked like an eyesore, but had it been used as a rare Heartless in say Monstro, I could have been a bit more forgiving. The Giga's Shadow, which I just hate saying, Giga's Shadow, anyways, aren't a recolor of the shadows, but rather a resizing of them. I like them. They feel clumsy and come off as quite a scare when you first encounter them, as you wouldn't expect the third wave of shadows to suddenly double in size. The Black Ballad is this mystic and seemingly tranquil Heartless. It doesn't spawn, it's just there when you enter the bamboo thicket, floating quietly until you approach, where it then proceeds to challenge you to its version of the shell game. Its dark palette is a good fit for how it presents itself and how it functions. The Sniper Wild probably could have worked with other palettes too, but I like this one quite a lot. The lone purple monkey prancing around in front of the fountain. It also has these bright lines across parts of its body, resembling that of a sniper's aim. The pink Agaricus is probably the most masochistic Heartless there is, as it derives enormous pleasure from being beaten to a pulp. Had it replaced the white mushroom or the black fungus, I would have been upset, but it doesn't, so I like it. It also has several pink hearts around its hat, which are cute. The pink Agaricus is cute. The Grand Ghost truly lives up to its name, a much larger and sicklier version of the Search Ghost. It's cool, just cool. Had this palette replaced the OG Search Ghost, I wouldn't even have been mad. Jet Balloon is a hilarious Heartless as it frantically and confused zooms around the Neverland sky. Its green colors complement Hook's ship, and I like that, and I think it could have worked fine in Atlantica too. It looks a lot better than the brown recolor we got for the actual Aqua Tank. The missile divers which accompany the jet balloon also look good. They could have been a fine enough recolor of the Screwdriver had it gotten one, especially seeing as the Aqua Tank lost its blue. In contrast to the Screwdrivers, they also have much more defined zigzags. The Stealth Soldier's palette is quite whatever to me. I prefer it over the recolored Soldier, though it feels a bit more undefined. Not too fond of this one. And I think it knows it looks a bit awkward too, seeing as it primarily keeps itself invisible. The red armor exists in vanilla Kingdom Hearts 1, but isn't properly named until Final Mix. As you refight the guard armor at the Colosseum, I find it fitting that it got a new palette and a new name. A bit odd that the opposite armor then retains its colors when it later shows up. As a child, I could have sworn I fought a red opposite armor, but I know I must have just imagined it. And the Sneak Army shares an identical story to the previous entry. New colors and a new name for its Colosseum rematch. I like this more than the original one, as the darker palette makes it actually look like a member of the Heartless species. So that's the end of that. There are certain recolors I really properly enjoy and prefer, but for the most part, these changes really weren't necessary. I think the big difference between the original palette and the Final Mix palette, for me at least, though there are several recolors in the Final Mix which I do quite prefer, I usually don't dislike their original versions. The original palette overall is just good, while the Final Mix one has some that are good, some that are even better, but mostly have ones that are a bit inferior and some I think are just horrendous. Whereas the original one don't have anyone I think are outright just bad. Again, if only they could have added a button to toggle between each version, that'd be great. So, which recolors do you prefer, and which ones offends you the most? We're all bound to have different preferences, so please share yours if you want to. And remember to hit the like button if you like the video, and you also only need to hit it once. I'm not some pink Agaricus which derives pleasure from repeated beatings. That's it for now. Be kind to one another. Tell your parents or your legal guardians that you love them, if they are worthy of your love of course, and if you do in fact love them. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.